Now that we are familiar with the two essential tools, the pencil and the brush tool, I am going to now attempt to draw over these sunglasses. You have the same file, so you can practice with me, and make sure that you select the drawing layer when you do this, because that's the only available layer, the others are locked. We will learn later how to place in images into documents and paint over them or trace manually over them, but for now let's just stick to this example. I am going to use the paintbrush and set the stroke size to 0.25. That way I can draw much thinner lines. I will make sure that the keep selected and edit selected paths are both on. And I'm going to use intentionally a different color than the colors of the image in the background. So like this red one will work quite nicely. It will stand out. Now, where to start is completely up to you. I'm going to zoom closer so I can paint these lines nice and smoothly. And it's good to remember not to draw too close. So not to zoom too close, because that can also make it difficult to follow along the lines. You can see the way I draw is that I try to draw smaller sections, and whenever I feel like I need to improve some of my lines, I go back and redraw them. Like here as well, again, I'm not happy with that line, so I come back and redraw it. Don't waste too much time on sections like that. You can always come back later and refine it. So instead, I'm just going to carry on drawing further these parts. And all this is going to be one long section or one line. When I get here, I'm intentionally going to finish my line going up, and I will also do the same thing here at the other end. You will see why I'm doing this. This is just a personal preference, but you will see what's the advantage in this later. Again, I'm just going to try to refine that section there, but I can also hold down the Alt key and draw over that part, which will give me the smooth tool. Now for the next line, I am going to concentrate on the top part of this section. So I will start a new line, and you can see I started it from the outside, and I try to draw in a very dynamic line instead of drawing small sections, and I just redraw parts that I'm not happy with. That's quite nice line work. Now we will obviously have to draw the inside as well, so I'm just going to draw over these parts here. And once again, I try to be more dynamic and not worrying about small details, because we can always refine them later. That looks good. Now this one needs to go further up like that, and then come down, something like that. Let's continue drawing around. That's all right. Now we can also draw this line here in the background, so let me just start drawing it and then continue. This is going to give the depth for our shades. That's it. We go up and then finish our line there. Now again, we can refine it here if we want to. I can also use the smooth tool, and that will work. Okay, now we can draw the other line here. When a line is very straight, you can even cheat. Holding down the Shift key, you can draw a straight line, and then you can just move it into position and use the rotate option. Now there is the rotate tool. You can select that and click on the point which you want to maintain, and then the rest of this shape is going to rotate around that point. Now it's nicely placed there, and we can even duplicate this. Holding down the Alt key, we can copy paste it onto the other side, and even this bottom line here can be used. Maybe again using the rotate tool. By pressing R, you can very quickly switch to the rotate tool, select the point which you keep in the original position, and there's the line. Now you can switch back to the brush tool and continue drawing from that section that you created, and then you can finish the line the way you want. And then again, I hold down the Command key or Control key to select another line. Again, continue drawing that. Once again, try to finish it. Do the same thing with the other one. Finish it up there. And then we can also draw another line just to close it off. And then we need one more line. So I'm just going to draw that additional line like that. Now, why did I draw these sections in such a messy way? You will see at the end. So let's just quickly finish this off. I'm going to now start drawing from here. And I'm not even going to bother about the straight line in this case. I just draw it very quickly. There's one. I could even continue in the other way. This shape can be all in one line, because I can see the whole section like that. And then the next line, I will start from here and draw it. If you are drawing the opposite direction, sometimes your hand might not work as precisely as it would in the other direction. So you might want to switch directions if you ever feel like it's not following it the way you wanted. And then once again, holding down the Alt key, I can refine that slightly. Now, let's have a look. So we have the majority of the lines in place already. Probably the messiest part is this here. So we might need to work a little bit more on that. But what I am going to do now is to use a feature that we used previously, the shape builder. But before I switch to that, make sure I select all the lines together. Then we can zoom a bit closer. And now comes the shape builder. Remember, that's Shift M if you want to quickly select it. And then hold down the Alt key. I can very quickly get rid of all those lines that I don't need. So these overlapping lines we won't need. We don't need that one. We don't need this one. And then we can go all the way up here. We won't need this line. We don't need these. You can even draw over the parts that you don't need. There's a little bit left there. That looks much better now. And we can do exactly the same thing here. Just remove the ones that you don't need. Again, Alt click on these one by one, or you can just also hold down Alt and draw over all the sections that you don't need. And then I think that it is it. Maybe that one there needs to be deleted as well. Now, this is one of the many ways you can draw in Illustrator. And let's see the drawing without the image in the background. Now, if you find any parts that you don't like this one here, I'm not entirely sure why it ended up looking like that. And if I'm not happy about the line, I can also just delete it and use again the brush tool and just draw another line that looks better. Okay, I just simplified it a bit. That looks still fine. And the only thing missing is the three-dimensional aspect of the actual glass parts. So I'm going to use the brush tool again, and I will draw over these parts here now, just using my imagination. I don't even need the reference anymore, like that. And once again, to make sure that these lines all match up, I'm going to use the shape builder, select everything, hold down Alt, and just quickly get rid of those overlapping parts. I intentionally draw those overlapping elements so I can see that it's completely matching and all the lines are closed. Now still, of course, I can always select parts of it, and if I'm not happy how it looks, I can redraw it. So that's the amazing thing about Illustrator, that it's very easy to do that. And I could even select the whole thing all together and go into the Object, Path, Simplify option, which might not work perfectly in some cases. So you might want to be a bit careful with it. And instead of going all the way down, that might mess up the drawing, but it can also create a quite abstract result. I'm going to keep it around 80%. Let's just see how that looks. Okay, some parts looks better, some parts are actually worse than before. But yeah, it nicely improved sections of it. So I'm going to actually accept this and I'll click OK. You see I use 91%, so it's quite close to the original, but there is quite a big difference in the amount of anchor points. I used 148 in my drawing, but Illustrator managed to simplify it down to 75 points. Now, less anchor points is most of the time an advantage. So you might want to use this simplify more often if you've never used it before. And I'm going to change the color of my outlines to black. Now we achieved a quite nice line work, But there's another great technique that I use normally to create a thicker outline. So once I have my object, I want to have an outline. And I'm going to do that quickly here. So I select the whole shape. And I intentionally do this on the side, so I copy it, holding down Alt, click and drag. And once we have our copy, there's actually many different ways of doing this, but we need to fill this in completely. Now, I prefer to use this tool called Live Paint Bucket. So I'm going to select that. K is the shortcut. And you can use the arrows on the keyboard to switch between colors. I will intentionally use something different like red color, and I'm going to zoom closer, and I am going to click in these sections. I can even just quickly click and drag over the sections, all of them, and paint everything red or whatever color you used. So that's completely filled in the shape that we created. Now that it's created, have it selected and then click on expand here on the top, which turns these all into normal shapes. And then switch to the shape builder tool and paint over or join together the areas which you want to keep as the outlines. Now avoid the central part here because that's going to be necessary to get the lines right. I'm going to paint over everything. And now that it's filled in, we can also assign an outline or stroke, and we can increase that stroke size, let's say up to something stronger like 3 points, and we can set it to align the stroke outside. Now we can even remove the fill color and just simply move this whole thing back here onto our original drawing, so align it to that. And apart from a couple of problems around here, it looks quite good already. Select this group that I just created, double click on it, and then zoom closer so I can use direct selection tool or the lasso tool and make a selection of that part there, delete all those points. I can also do the same thing here, delete them, and that's the majority that was visible. So now I can just double click again outside and we have a nice outline. So this is without the strong outline and this is with it. Now, of course, this outline can always be amended. So if I feel like it's too strong, I can reduce it a bit. And then last but not least, we can draw a little bit of shading on the glasses or like a reflection by using again the brush tool. But for this, make sure you double click on it and turn off the keep selected and edit selected paths. Otherwise, it's going to redraw the lines when you draw them too close to each other. So I can start drawing the lines, and it's like a bit of a shading that we add on this section here. You can always have the lines a little bit closer. And don't forget, we can also delete the ones that go too far. So I will go over this section again. All I'm just trying to do is to keep the lines diagonal going the same direction, like that. And as I said, if there's anything that went too far, we can select all these lines together and use the shape builder tool to remove the overhanging parts. And if I zoom out, you can see that the style is now very similar to the other illustrations. So don't forget to select the whole illustration, group it together, and then it will be easy to select it. So remember, press Command G or Control G to do that. Now I can also make it smaller or bigger. Just remember that for this you need the scale, strokes and effects option on. Otherwise the stroke size will be messed up if you don't use that. I'm just going to increase it up, maybe turn it around a bit, and there's the shades that we created. And it fits nicely in this collection, I think. At the end of this chapter, I'm going to give you more exercises where you can practice using the pencil and the brush tool and all these techniques that I went through in this video. But now it's time in the next video to look at some other special drawing tools.